morning guys, this is the Archery series and this is video number 10. We're going to learn how to properly set a nocking point and how to tie a professional D-loop. The shopping list first of all, as usual. What are we going to need? We're going to need some D-loop material, BCY size 24 preferably, and some serving material, BCY size 400 preferably. And we need one of our arrows with the Nock installed. On this bow we're using Easton X400 7.2 GPI. If you haven't chosen your arrow yet, don't worry, in the next videos we're going to explain how to choose the right arrows for your draw length, draw weight, and your bow. And we're gonna need some tools specifically. We're just gonna use some levels and a T-square. For the Pro Shop tools needed, just check our video number 5. And as usual, make sure you have all the material before you start working and follow each step very carefully so you don't risk ruining the equipment. To set the nocking point and then tie up a D-loop on our bow, we first need to identify the burger button or burger hole. The burger button is where you install your arrow rest, and it's exactly where the arrow is gonna sit when you shoot. Now we're not going into technicalities if it's exactly the middle of the riser, different cams, different bow structures. Just know that when you set up your nocking point, and we'll see how to do it with the arrow perpendicular to the string, you need the arrow to stay perfectly leveled with the burger button. Let's start working. Perfectly level vertically the riser. The left and right tilt of the bow needs to be 0. Do the same with the string. It needs to be perfectly vertical. No forward and backward tilt of the bow. And let's proceed to set the nocking point. We're gonna start showing how to set the nocking point with an arrow square, and then we'll show you how to do it with the regular arrow shaft, with and without our arrow rest installed. Once the bow is perfectly level vertically and horizontally, install the T-square on the string and slide it down up until the bottom edge of the bar perfectly passes through the middle of the BERGEN hole. Tie up a couple of rounds of serving exactly aligned with the lower 0 of the T-square. Place one of your nocks exactly on top of the serving that you just tied up, and then very tight do 5 rounds of serving right on top of the nock and 5 right behind. Cut the excess of serving line at about 1/4 inch from the last knot. Remove the nock very carefully without damaging the string. Cut off the first 2 rounds of serving that we put on the string at the beginning to set the center of the nocking point. And then with a lighter, burn the little 1/4 inch excess of serving that you left all the way down to the knot and squeeze it to make it stick to the serving. To set the nocking point with an arrow shaft, put a couple of rounds of serving more or less in front of the arrow rest. Don't tie them up too tight because you need to be able to slide them up and down. Nock an arrow right below the serving. Put an arrow level on the arrow, any arrow level. Hold the arrow shaft right in the middle of the BERGEN hole and slide the serving up and down up until the arrow is perfectly leveled. Get the arrow off the bow and tie up 3 more rounds of serving. 2 we did them before, plus 3, and we get to 5 as before. As usual, cut the excess about 1/4 inch, burn it all the way to the knot and stick it to the serving. Knock the arrow back right underneath the serving and then very accurately tie 1 round of serving just underneath the arrow nock. Remove the arrow and then go ahead and tie up 5 more rounds and then burn the excess. To set the nocking point with the arrow rest on, just make sure that the arrow rest is centered horizontally and, most importantly, that it's centered vertically. Then repeat the exact same process that we did before. Tie up a couple of rounds of serving just in front of the arrow rest. Raise up the arrow rest, nock an arrow, put a level on the arrow, move the serving up and down up until the arrow is perfectly leveled. If the arrow rest is perfectly set to 0, both horizontally and vertically, the arrow will go perfectly in the middle of the BERGEN hole. Get the arrow off the bow and tie up 3 more rounds of serving. 2 we did them before, plus 3, and we get to 5 as before. As usual, cut the excess about a quarter inch, burn it all the way to the knot and stick it to the serving. Knock the arrow back right underneath the serving and then very accurately tie one round of serving just underneath the arrow nock. Remove the arrow and then go ahead and tie up 5 more rounds and then burn the excess. We're ready to tie up our D-loop. Just remember that the standard D-loop should be between 5/8 and 3/4 inch. We'll see later on different sizes and also different style of D-loop, but for the moment standard D-loop 3/4 inch. Put the bow back in the press midway through the limbs with very little pressure, just to hold it steady. Cut off about 8 inches of D-loop material. Go back to your bow, start going underneath and leaving out an end of about 1 inch. Come up with the longer end and pass it behind the short end from the left to the right, and then down in front of the string and around on the bottom, and come up from behind, passing inside the loop that you have created. Tie up the knot a little bit by holding the string and pulling the long end of the D-loop material. Get a flat bar that is about 5/8 of an inch wide. The T-square is exactly 5/8 of an inch wide, so it's perfect for this job. Go above it and then down in front of the string and hold the D-loop material against it. Come back from the back inside the D-loop and go back down, passing behind the string, and come back up from the front, going inside the loop that you have created. Push left and right node of the loop against the serving and pull up the two loose ends of the loop that you tied, so it's a little bit more stable and stays firmly on the string. Put the T-square bar back inside the loop, make sure that it fits nicely and tight, and then with a pair of round nose pliers, pull the two loose ends of the D-loop pretty tight. Squeeze the knots a little bit to compact them and keep pushing them against the serving. Get the round nose pliers inside the D-loop and pull them open as hard as you can. This will tie up the D-loop pretty firmly and stretch it a little, and it will reach more or less 4/3 of an inch. A little bit more stretching will happen when you start shooting on it, and you'll reach exactly 3/4 of an inch. Cut the two loose ends of the D-loop material at about a quarter inch, and then undo the fabric to create a little nice puff of loose fabric with your finger. Melt down the loosened fabric up to about 1/8 of an inch from the knot. Flatten up the top of the melted ball that you created, pushing it with the lighter a little bit, and then with your fingers adjust it and make it round and pretty. That's gonna make sure that the loose end cannot go through the knot. Don't bother if the melted plastic is not exactly touching the end of the knot. Pulling the loop, when you start shooting the arrow, the knot will adjust itself and the melted end, the stopper of the knot, will go sit perfectly at the beginning of the knot. The knot will never get undone. It's a very safe procedure. Tie up the D-loop a little bit more by pulling inside with the round nose pliers. Push the knots against the serving again. Put the bow back on the draw board and re-go through all the settings that we did in video number 8. Link is up right, and if needed, readjust a little bit the settings. Thank you for watching as usual, and if you like the contents, please leave a like, but most important, subscribe to the channel to support its growth.